Hello, my name is John Dutton of the World Economic Forum and our Uplink initiative. I'm thrilled to be with you today as part of the Ocean Innovation Africa session. And today we're going to be doing a couple things. First off, you've just watched a video about the impact that we're beginning to have with Uplink Ocean. Thrilled that we were able to share that with you today, and really excited to use this as an opportunity to launch a collaboration between Ocean Hub Africa and Uplink, where we're going to be inviting all of you to join us on the platform, first of all, where we have a dedicated topic area on the ocean, but also where Ocean Hub Africa is going to be actually facilitating and curating an action group. An action group is a digital community on our platform. The purpose of this one is to accelerate the development and adoption of ocean solutions across Africa. So please do take the time to join us on Uplink. It's uplink.weforum.org. You can sign up, and as soon as you do that, you can explore through to the ocean topic area. And we hope to see tons of the participants that have been a part of the Ocean Innovation Africa Summit to join us on Uplink in the coming days and weeks, and to really be part of a broader ecosystem that's supporting innovators in the ocean space and really across all the other SDGs. So with that, I'll make a little bit of a transition to the session that we're going to be running now, called Building the Pipeline of Ocean Impact Startups. And if I could invite our panelists to join the session, it'd be fantastic to have you guys all with us. I'm going to first introduce everybody. I would invite the audience to take the time to stay engaged, send through the questions that you have on the chat in Pine, and we will be sure to answer them. We're really thrilled to have a great panel with us today for this discussion, looking at that pipeline of ocean impact startups in Africa. Let me start by introducing Kolisa Yolasinyana. Kolisa is a PhD candidate in oceanography at the University of Cape Town. I think importantly, she's been a leading figure in the science and STEM space, and is bringing to us really, I think, on the ground perspectives from Cape Town and looking at the ocean space and startups there in Cape Town. We're thrilled also to have Kenneth Oguzi, who's the CEO and co-founder of Active, as well as the vice president of DotCan. In particular, maybe I can point out the Africa Canada Trade and Investment Venture, Active, which is an organization that seeks to foster collaborations between Canadian businesses and their West African counterparts. Lovely to have also Forby with us, Forby Parise Nyose, who is better known as the Plastic Man for his efforts to raise awareness on the issue of plastic pollution. So no better person to have us talk about startups around plastics on the continent. Really excited also to have Rob Cortell with us, who's the founder and executive chairman of Intellex. He is a former U.S. Federal Maritime Commissioner, but also an investor, advisor, technologist, and serial entrepreneur in both government and commerce. I think we're especially excited to have you with us, Rob. You've served multiple presidents over your tenure, and I'm sure can bring a lot to this area of the discussion in terms of this intersection of government and the private sector. And last but not least by any means, thrilled to have Ross Brooks with you. He is the investment manager for Catapult Ocean, and has a rich experience in the impact investing space from a number of top-tier investment institutions. I think we're really excited from the Uplink side to have you on, Ross. You've been with us really from day one when it comes to Uplink Ocean as an organization, supporting what our effort is to at a global scale to help support innovators for the SDGs and creating an ecosystem online, a platform where those innovators who would like to scale up their innovation have this space, and the efforts that Catapult has done in our first year have been fantastic. So let's kick off. I'm really excited, and I'll invite each of them to introduce themselves as we go through in terms of where they are, and add anything to the short bit that I provided. I'd like to kick off with you, Kolisa, however, and just look into really this whole space of the ocean startup. Can you talk for a little bit on your side of kind of what are some of the main channels for ideation and solution development in Blue Innovation, and really that science angle. What are some of the things where you think science is pushing startups in Africa to have a focus on the oceans?
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Um, so from my side, I bring the science into this discussion. And this is a very important part of ideation and solution development in general, because science is not just what we use, but the base of what ideation and solution development are about. We are the fundamentals of how the startups happen, whether they are successful or not, because we do the observations, we do the advising of not just the government, but also the entities that aim to do these startups. However, I would like to bring this in as a scientist, that from our angle, being the ones who drive the startups is a very slow journey coming from us, because according to our curriculum, and I speak on a global, I'm generalizing when I talk about this particular topic, where we don't have the expertise to do the ideation and solution development as the scientists ourselves, but we are employed by these startups to be the brains of their companies. And I think these are things that need to be upgraded, changed. We need to evolve with the growing industry of basically the blue economy, blue innovation, because we are the ones who are at the base of it, who make the policies that drive these startups. So that's my point of view.
And what are are there some particular areas that you think are important from the science, from the policy perspective, that you would emphasize for us to build this kind of pipeline of startups?
I think working together with the startups more broadly, not just to use our ideas from a distance, not just use our ideas, but to use the science that we do and the results that we come up with, that we channel into the startups. Maybe we need to work much more together in trying to make the startups work.
This is great. Well, I wanted to kind of go straight to you on the ground in Cape Town. Rob, let's come to you next, and maybe it'd be all right for us to get you to come in a little bit from the angle of the macro. If you're looking at the both of the intersection between policy and business, as well as your perspective as an investor and entrepreneur, what are some of those basic needs that you think the African ocean startup scene needs to develop, and any trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I suspect their needs are the same as they are pretty much all around the excuse me, all around the planet. I think one of the interesting issues in the ocean investment space is that you kind of have a push and a pull phenomenon. This is, first of all, not many people know very much about the ocean in terms of the general public. And I would say that probably translates to venture capital and private equity and the whole space. And I'm sure Ross can talk about this more, but in the last couple of years, I have a sense that a lot of the early people coming in from the big funds, not the specialized funds, tend to be a little bit of dumb money. And now you're starting to see more differentiation by the funds as to what they want to invest in. So on the push side, the industry, the maritime industry, as one of the users, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Europe, wherever else, is sort of, they push back from innovation that doesn't come from inside the industry. And by the way, it's an industry from which not much innovation comes or has come over the last 200 years, other than ship types. And then there's a pull phenomenon. and I'm sorry, the pull phenomenon, it's the other way around. There's not much pull from the industry from the outside on the push. They tend to push back against people who are not from inside the industry itself. So it's the industry, the maritime industry is sclerotic. Now that's separate from the ocean biology and energy and all of these other things, but they all intersect, all have similar characteristics. So I would say I do think we're at the stage where we're not seeing as much money as we need to really drive academic innovation and technology innovation in this space writ large.
Okay. Well, this is an area that we're going to come to. I know Ken and Ross, I'm sure you'll have some insight to this, but let's go from that broad kind of international space to you, Forby. You're coming to us from Cameroon. I wonder if you'd be willing to share your perspective on some of the current challenges that we're seeing across the continent.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's a privilege to represent the Sustainable Ocean Alliance on this platform. The blue economy is something that is much talked about all over the world, but from an African perspective, it's something that is not yet mainstreaming. A lot of governments are not mainstreaming the blue economy in their developmental strategies or their plan. So I think there's a lot that is to be done in terms of raising awareness of blue economy within the context of development and policy. It's really limited, and the knowledge gap between the government and other stakeholders really needs to be bridged. A lot still needs to be done. A lot still needs to be done within the African context. Knowledge sharing and information is really critical to really boost this sector in Africa, because from an African perspective, development is something that we are yet to know what the Africans need. Africans are unique and very different from other parts of the world. But what works for Africa won't work in other parts of the world, or what is working in Europe or America won't really work for Africa.
Thanks for that initial perspective, Forby. Any examples that you've seen that have worked in terms of that, either in Cameroon or around the continent? I know that you're representing SOA around the region, and please do come in. I don't know if Kolisa or Ken also may have some examples of this, but what are some that you've seen? Is there anything on the ground that Cameroon has done to encourage some of that startup ecosystem in the ocean space?
Okay.
Or more broadly in the blue economy?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk within this sector, but not much action. I think the youth are trying to gear up, but the limitations are far much more than the aspirations of the young people and those who want to get involved. There's a lot of talk, but not so much support that would be needed to boost this sector. For example, I know of a startup in Douala that is trying to turn plastics into something useful for fishermen, but the support towards the sector is still very low, and people do not recognize ocean startups as potential economic boosters for the country as a whole.
Okay, well, as we go through this, hopefully there will be some examples that we can point to of things that are working really well. Ross, let me come to you next. We have a, from our first Uplink Oceans Innovation Sprint, there were actually, I guess there were 2 of our innovators that were coming through from Africa, though they were really small. In fact, one of them based in Cameroon, called Madiba in Nature. But yeah. I wonder if you have any thoughts, Ross, on kind of how is Catapult looking at the African innovation scene? Have you guys done investments in any of the startups on the continent? Would love to have you share a little bit of your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, John. I guess first of all, just a bit of context on where I'm coming from. I'm based in Oslo, so my point of view is very much an Oslo perspective. But we have made, Catapult Ocean has made 2 investments on the continent. Very, very different investments. I'd like to kind of outline a couple of reflections about that also. Catapult Ocean, we're an accelerator program and an early stage VC. We look to invest in companies which are both commercially viable, but also create a positive impact on the ocean. In terms of building pipeline, we are actively scouting for companies every year to bring into our program. We invest in roughly 10 companies per year from all over the world. So building pipeline is very much core to our business. In terms of the African ecosystem, we have around 1,400, just over, startups, ocean impact startups specifically in our pipeline globally. Only 65 of those are from the continent, which is about 5%, which is very small given the size of Africa, the opportunities, the problems facing, or I guess the opportunity in the blue economy for Africa is humongous. So we would expect more solutions coming from the continent. We have made 2 investments so far, as I said. One from North Africa, which is a deep tech AI startup to combat illegal fishing, and one Kenyan startup, which is combating post-harvest losses in fisheries in the Lake Victoria region using solar-powered refrigeration. So there are amazing solutions, both coming from very kind of, I guess, R&D heavy deep tech, and also kind of more capital light business models where it's more, I guess, business model innovation rather than deep R&D. But it's really encouraging to see solutions come through. We would like to see more, and I think a reflection is that communities such as Ocean Hub Africa, the Uplink platform partnering to build, to showcase solutions and build stories, accelerator programs and kind of aggregators of quality startups. These are all super important for more international players and investors to get visibility into the ecosystem, because I think that's an area where we can do a lot better. We'd like to have more insight.
Ross, I'm going to stay with you for one last item before we keep going. Can you talk also about the funding gaps and kind of in the broader space around the world? What are some of the gaps that you think need to be filled, and both in terms of size and the types of funding and diversity that you think would help both in Africa and around the world?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I actually mirror Rob's.
Looks like we might be have a little bit of a technical spot there with Ross. Kenneth, we're going to come to you sooner than we thought. Before I do so, however, let me just give another plea to the audience. Would love for you guys to come in and send through any questions. You can do so through the chat function you have on Pine, and we'll get them, let's say, sorted out to the right speaker. So please do join us by being part of the discussion. Ken, but over to you. You are working at building a bridge between the West, Canada in particular, and West Africa. How has this come to your line of sight? Where do you see some of the important stakeholders for the development of Blue Innovation, and how can the private sector play a stronger role in supporting the startup scene?
Thank you, John, and good morning to our audience. So I'm based here in Nova Scotia, Canada. I think one of the key things we have seen, especially within the ocean startup space, just like it's evident in other sectors, is the need for more like collaboration and partnerships. So, sort of bringing all the major players, all the drivers of growth and development. So sort of bringing like the business, academia, the government, all of them working on the same, like sort of having like a platform whereby knowledge, resources, all of these things can actually be shared. Because I think, having that sort of collaborative approach is very, very important. Otherwise, what you can then have is more like a very disjointed approach, which we have witnessed in the recent past is not very effective. And then if you look at it from the Africans, from the African perspective, 2 key things are very important in terms of innovation in Africa. It needs to solve problems, and then it needs to create jobs. And if whatever initiative or programs you need to put out there has to definitely, sort of address this, both of these issues. And then if you then look at the fact that in the region, startup finance is a very, very big deal. And like Fobi alluded to earlier, the government has, especially when you look at like sub-Saharan Africa, where we can actually say like the government has not been proactive enough in terms of, providing those sort of platforms or like any form of, financial incentives for most of the ocean startups. So until we start finding ways to actually ensure that those partnerships and collaborations are really highlighted and strengthened, that typically would be the first starting point in terms of, providing that whole support for ocean startups and then helping them get to that space where they can solve problems as well as create jobs. So I'll probably stop for now.
Okay, Ken, that's good. And if we did get this going, what do you think could be the potential for some of the job creation on the continent for this? How do you think ocean startups could play a role in job creation and development?
I think it's huge, John. I think it's huge. I think at the end of the day, the key thing there is by the time you have some of these partnerships and collaborations going, most of these startups will then be able to scale. Scalability is a huge thing in business. So like every other sector, one of the key issues with startups, a lot of them, they go through what we call the valley of death. So basically, a lot of them start off and in a few years, they fade out. So understanding the fact that, as ocean startups, when you go into whatever business you're going into, of course, you're solving a problem, but always have that sort of longer term vision. Think about sustainability, think about commercialization. And that's where some of these partnerships come up. And I think it's also great when you have a lot of platforms where this knowledge can be exchanged, because that's sort of where people can actually learn what are some of the sources of finance I've never thought about, moving away from just only like, VCs or angel investors. There could be other means or other ways. And that partnership is also very important. One of the things we've done recently with the DotCan initiative, which is the development of ocean technical capacity, in which we are working on, is to we've created like a knowledge exchange and mentorship program, which we just launched on our website. And the idea is really to create those sort of connections, match individuals between, who are in the global south and the global north, just for people to be able to have those exchange. Being able to then create those movement flows, those resources flow, that's typically one of the ways you can help, people get the level of capacity, which can then sort of then progress into like job creations and scalability of whatever product or service they have.
Brilliant, Ken. It looks like we do have Ross back. Ken, you mentioned this valley of death for startups and entrepreneurs. Maybe we can use that as a kind of bridge back to what you were talking about, Ross, when you left us. So kind of this funding gap. Does maybe that resonates a little bit with you, what you heard Ken talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are actually more valleys of death for ocean tech startups than the many other types of business, actually. So there are gaps that do exist. From our perspective, I think it's ocean tech is hard. It often involves hardware. It's put into the ocean oftentimes. Really tough environments. See, Kalisa is nodding her head. Many challenges to deploying technology into the ocean.
It's also expensive.
In order to get to a commercial position, startups need to de-risk their tech. It's not very appealing for investors to come in when that tech risk still exists. So we really need to funnel or find more innovative ways to de-risk technology in the ocean space, so that we can then attract more commercial investors at a later stage. So I think that's the first funding gap. And often we see companies that have attracted grant financing from an earlier stage to try and get to that level, but it often isn't sufficient. And Catapult Ocean, actually, we do take on some tech risk still, because we need to by necessity, and we expect. The second gap, I think, is post seed, pre-Series A. You might be building a product. You're selling typically to quite conventional industries. Might be maritime, might be aquaculture. Typically B2B businesses. There aren't many consumers in the ocean, and so when you've finished, when you have a prototype and you're ready to get to market, there's often a capital requirement, a working capital requirement to enable you to actually sell. You can't just start gaining quick revenue from selling directly to consumers like in many other businesses. So that's another gap. I think in the ocean tech space, especially, it is a niche, and there is a quite specific skill set required to take products to market. And so I think the proof points that startups need to get to in order to raise capital to scale are quite unexplored. So it's quite rare to see ocean tech companies raising humongous sums of capital from an early stage. Investors need to get more comfortable, I think, and see these kind of proof points and see these positive stories come through to get more, I guess, comfort and understanding of the space.
That's great. That kind of gets into both the question of why, but also kind of some of the things that we can do to help solve it. And I wonder, I'd love to come to Rob and Kolisa again on some of these aspects.
Yeah.
Rob, do you want to come in and kind of share some of your thoughts?
Yeah. I think one of the issues and Ross and I think talking about many of the same things here. The reality is, to be sustainable, any business in this space in Africa or otherwise has to be a business. I mean, it actually has to generate revenues that exceed, expenses. And I do think a lot of what has motivated some of the early innovation, and this is not a criticism, it's a fact, that is a need to be doing something that you would call as good. And we need all of that, but that's sometimes not always a business model. As we know in tech, a great idea doesn't always make a great business, and that's what people are trying to figure out. I don't know enough about how and governments encourage innovation in Africa or Europe, for that matter. But I can tell you here in the U.S., the National Science Foundation, for example, will give out what are called SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Grants of upwards, and they do it in tiers. They'll give you $200,000 for an interesting idea. You have to go through a little bit of market proof, and then you could get up to $1.5 million. The military, interestingly, is one of the biggest funders of early stage technology here in the United States, and it is all over the place. It ranges from ocean related to health to data. Again, Ross is exactly right about depending on where you intersect, you may have high CapEx. You may, it's not just like starting a Facebook. A lot of the innovation comes that I'm seeing is coming out of older engineers, and they are tweaks. And you actually want that. You want to see people who are in the industry start providing change, and when they provide a tweak to an engineering piece or a coating on a ship or an industrial process of some sort, they're more likely to get funding out of the industry itself. But I do think, in general, people need to be focusing on what things provide business value in Africa. And that might be in the food space, it might be in energy, it can be all of these things, but it has to be focused.
This is I think really helpful, and we're getting good feedback from the audience. Thank you for sending through some questions, which we are going to come to. I'd love to, Kolisa, on your side, if I can begin to take a little bit of an uptick in terms of inspiration. I wonder if you have, or if you believe ocean startups can provide societies in Africa with solutions that are really helping people connect with the oceans, helping with some of the societal problems that they're facing. What are are there any concrete examples that you'd come to in terms of some success stories?
Well, there aren't any examples that I can call by name, but I do know that, for example, here in the Western Cape, and I do know that across Africa and other parts of South Africa, including the Eastern Cape, there are fishing startups that have changed the lives of the communities. And we know that, especially in the Eastern Cape, where I come from, we know that there are communities that depend on the ocean. Their entire livelihoods are somewhat based or entangled and married to the ocean. And therefore, these startups do really, with creating employment, do really change even the mindset of the communities, because with the incentive of a salary, the entire family will have a different mindset of how the ocean should be taken care of, ocean health, the biodiversity, the coast, the benefits that they get from the ocean. And therefore, this is a strong bond that is created by these startups between the startups themselves and the communities, and therefore at large societies, because this becomes a ripple effect and it spreads to other parts of the close by communities.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that startups are what we need to be looking at right now. And I think here in the global South, that is not happening in the extent that we should be making it happen. And as a scientist, I think we should be one of the drivers of making this happen, because we all understand how the ocean functions, how it gives back to them. They start looking at the entire globe, including the global ocean, differently and in a more positive manner, trying to protect the ocean. And the main aim really is to understand how it works, and therefore protect it from pollution, from basically trying to make it a healthier ocean, global ocean.
That I think that issue of raising awareness is so important. I see there's a couple of African-based stories, the Shark Safe Barrier, Abelobi, that are coming through the chat in terms of examples. On Uplink Ocean, one of our thought is that very much to that point, Kalisa, we do need to raise awareness so that people are demanding more change, more investment in solutions to the oceans. And there's maybe two questions I want to come to from the audience that I think are important here. One is, and maybe Ken, you might have an idea about this, is about the deal pipeline and how you see it evolving over the last years and into the future. What are you seeing when you're looking at the investments that are coming between Canada and Africa? Is there a trend that you're seeing for more people to take some appetite into the ocean startup scene?
Yes, I think like every other thing, the world, obviously it's a global village, and the distance between places is becoming shorter as the days progress. So I know Canada specifically has been trying to create a lot of initiatives or programs whereby we sort of just move away from just those community spaces of knowledge exchange and funding into global spaces. So like I just alluded to earlier, where I spoke about the knowledge exchange mobilization program, which DotCan, an organization I represent, just set out there. And basically, like I said, it's going to create those sort of connections between, ocean startups in Canada and, some of the companies which are advanced with their counterparts in West Africa, the ECOWAS countries. So if you then start creating some of these programs and initiatives where those conversations are going on, then obviously that sort of then gradually then migrates into sources of funding, sources of revenue, business ideas, and individuals being able to come together. Another key thing, which I think is also very important, which Canada is really focusing on, is the idea that ocean startups, like every other business, is also have to start looking to how do you export your products and services, because as we understand, I think Rob alluded to this earlier, sometimes ocean startups do have a lot of sort of altruistic mindset, or I'm trying to do good, or I'm trying to do something that will benefit everyone. But the sustainability of that becomes an issue, because at the end of the day, investors, entrepreneurs, they want to see the business value. No one is going to just pump in money into something they're not sure, or they're just doing it because of the fact that they want to save the world. So Canada is sort of then looking at those approaches. How do we balance that sort of like common good versus commercialization, and then have like collaborations with regions like West Africa, and then we just keep exchanging ideas and best practices.
Thanks for this one, Kenneth. There is a question about how can we connect startups to the broader companies and the bigger ecosystem. That's in a lot of ways why we've created Uplink. Uplink is trying to do that, and the World Economic Forum's ecosystem of partners and members, obviously, we think it could be of great value to startups in this space. And our philosophy is really that we can use this as a platform to surface up the most high impact examples, and for us to try to help them advance. And that's something that we're going to continue to try to do. We only have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask one more for Forby. Forby, I wanted you to come in. There were some questions that came in around kind of who are the important industries in the ocean space in Africa, and kind of which ones are most damaging. Are there solutions that are relevant for that? And then to the rest of the panel, please get your answers ready. I'm going to be looking for kind of rapid fire closing statements. I'd love for it to be really focused on what could be aspirational. What are some of the things that give you hope when it comes to this, the startup pipeline, and to have a great future in this space. But Forby, let's go to you first, and I'd love for you to come in.
Yeah, so in Africa specifically, we have a lot of startups are bringing up solutions regarding plastic. And I think you asked the question to Kolisa, which I wanted to come back quickly to. There's a success story of a startup in Cameroon called Madiba Nature. He's someone I met in person, and he's trying to transform old plastic bottles to fishing boats for fishermen, providing and donating them to local fishermen. I think we have a lot of challenges that need solutions in Africa, especially in the current problem we're facing with plastic pollution and other issues related to the ocean. Also, we have a problem with fisheries. We have indiscriminate fishing and overfishing, especially by fishing trawlers just carrying up everything. It's really unsustainable, and a lot of startups are trying to get up towards providing solutions in these sectors, like the example I just quoted.
That's brilliant, Forby. We have about 2 minutes and 30 seconds left, which means 30 seconds each. Let me come in. Let's start with you, Rob. 30 seconds. What gives you hope? What are some of the things you'd share as takeaways?
Well, I think, first of all, Africa has a great intellectual base and university system to generate ideas. But I think it continues. The first question people need to be asking is, who's my customer? Is this a great idea, but it's not going to be funded by the market? Or is it a great idea that requires funding from the government? And people have to decide that really early. Not enough is asked about the customer space anywhere here, on the Chesapeake Bay. But I think that people are focusing on that, and it's important.
This is great. That's good advice to our startup scene. Ken, over to you.
Yeah, I think for me, I think one of the key focuses is the need to ensure that startups start building more like regional partnerships as well, as a means of staying sustainable, as a means of raising funds internationally, as well as a means of creating those long-term partnerships, which will be useful, especially when they move to the phase where they are fully commercial, and then they can actually start thinking about exporting their products and services.
Okay, we're down to the last minute. Kolisa, Ross, Forby, in that order. Last moment to share.
Okay, me, Rena et al. 2019 says that about 1.5 trillion dollars is made up of making up the economy. And so
this one's a little tough, Kolisa. We can't hear you. So we're gonna go to Ross and Forby, and maybe you can type it in, and we'll get. Go ahead, Ross. Ross, you're on mute.
very quickly, I want to see more success stories which help to mobilize more capital into Africa and also inspire the next
Brilliant.
entrepreneurs.
Forby, any last statement?
I think African startups should focus on African problems that are culturally acceptable.
That's great. I love that you used the example of a success story, Madiba and Nature. They're an Uplink innovator. Please do join us at Uplink to carry on this conversation in the action group that Alexi and Ocean Africa Hub Ocean is going to be leading going forward. So thank you to our panelists, Rob, Ken, Kulisa, Ross, Forby. Brilliant to have you with us, and good luck to all the startups, investors, innovators, government folks that are out there on the line. We need your help.